If you are not a lifelong learner, ready to respond, ready to shift, ready to transition, then you become stagnant. You aren't manifesting the growth. And so I believe it's impactful to that because you cannot experience a journey without having it impact you. Otherwise, it's almost as if you go into the pool and you're not really getting in, right? So did you really go swimming when you went to the pool? And so in order to have your business grow, you have to be willing to be a learner, which means you got to take it in, you got to apply it so that it can make a difference.
Welcome to Black Businesses Matter, a podcast about why Black businesses matter and the benefits of collaborating and advocating for Black businesses to drive impact. Each episode, we will cover legacy, hope, Black joy, funding sources, cultural shifts, equity, and so much more. We will provide inspiration and action while spreading some joy to a thriving community of Black business owners and leading thought leaders. Black Business Matters podcast is produced by the L3 Agency, a culturally sensitive influencer marketing and communications firm in Chicago, where relationships are our currency, passion is our profit maker, and people are our bottom line. I'm Larvetta Lofton, your host and founder of the L3 Agency.
Welcome to another episode of Black Businesses Matter. This season is all about relationships and, ultimately Black relationships, whether that's personal or professional. Because as a business leader, our company, the L3 Agency, our mission is, and what we speak about is relationships are our currency. And we still believe that today. And what we are bringing on is an amazing thought leader, entrepreneur, podcast host, author, speaker, and she is a Fortune 500 business leader to talk about the value of relationships and understanding what that means in this culture of Black businesses. And so what I'm excited about, we think about Black relationships as this very kind of almost unattainable thing. And so what Denise is going to just talk to us is that really shows how she's empowering that. So I'm excited to have Denise Taylor, as I mentioned, is an entrepreneur and author, and she's going to talk about the books she has. So when we get done with here, you're going to have to get some of those books, download them, send them to a friend, whatever. And she is a wife. She is a mom and considers her gift to be a lifter of voices. Oh, I love that. With over 25 years of professional and relationship success, Denise is an advocate for empowerment and admonishing us to stop playing small and show up stronger in every area of our lives. And I'm excited to welcome Denise Taylor to the episode on relationships. Welcome, Denise.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let me say this, Denise. I love that you say stop playing small because real talk, as a business owner, people say you're a small business owner based on what the world. And I've always said to myself, there's nothing small about me as far as my stature, but I dream big, I think big, so my business is big to me. I never believed that I needed to play small in this world. So when you say that, tell me your journey to entrepreneurship and really helping others to really stop playing small in this space of life.
My journey to entrepreneurship has been an interesting one. I really feel like it's something that has been forever in my DNA, but I will tell you it is only in recent years that I have settled it for myself and accepted it fully. Growing up, my family owned a business. It was a record shop. So, that dates me. Back when we used to sell 8-track tapes and we used to sell needles and jukebox strips. We started out really, really young as entrepreneurs. And from my perspective, as soon as you could look over the counter, you were working in the family business. And that went on pretty much all of my life until I became a teenager. And the family business continued after that for a fair number of years. And so I was kind of bred to be an entrepreneur. And when I look at the pedigree of my family overall, it kind of spreads across us all to have kind of that interest. It could be a gene, if you will, but it was a bit of a spirit that kind of came alive, probably most significantly for me over the last, I'd say 3 to 5 years. When you grow up and you grow up working in business as a family business, you tend to want to chase after something else, right? And so you begin pursuing something else, and then life kind of teaches you the value of ownership, the value of investing in community, the value of investing in our people. If you are fortunate enough to, get the mindset shift that leads you there. And thankfully, that's kind of what happened to me. Right now, I have so many different businesses. I describe myself as multi-passionate, right? Because I am interested in so many different things. And I layer it back to lifting voices, but that manifests itself in so many different ways. It manifests itself through my podcast. It manifests itself through my agency to start podcasts. It manifests itself through my writing, my speaking, and all of those different platforms. The reason why I say I'm a lifter of voices in the context of being a business owner, the why for me is because I know what it's like to be waiting on an answer, to be waiting on something that can help you, to help change you, advance you, or progress you. And so if we can get voices lifted, then we can get the hope and the answers to people that need them. And so I host signature events. I use that as a platform building mechanism. I help launch podcasts. That is another way to lift voices. But that's a little bit about, where it all began and how it manifests itself now for me.
Thank you, Denise, for that. And just, one is I want to really dive into relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And understanding what's your relationship? Like, do you believe, how are Black relationships valued within our culture? And that could be personal or professional. How is that valued in our culture?
I would say, in my observation, I think that it was thought to be very radical at one point in time to list things as being Black focused or have a Black emphasis. But I think there have been so many societal things that have occurred in recent day that has given us this ability to arm ourselves and carry it as something we can esteem and something that we can really promote. And so I personally believe that there has been an evolution of it being something we value tremendously, broader than those people who are thought to be those mainstream advocates. This is something that has created an awareness that has stimulated us to have the kind of conversations we're having today, right? About me forging with another Black woman to talk about how we can further the mission of reaching Black people, through the commerce of business. So from my perspective, I believe it has strengthened. So if you ask me to tell you about Black relationships, I believe they have strengthened. Unfortunately, it came as a result of airing some really troubled scenarios, right? So if there was a silver lining to some of the things that we have seen manifest themselves in media broadly with some of the bad rhetoric and the bad experiences and often tragic experience that we as a community have faced, the silver lining is the fact that we are unifying more and we are recognizing our power more and we are supporting one another more. And I think that it has stimulated positively for relationships. Now, there seems to be this undercurrent that we have to get past when it comes to trusting one another. There's this undercurrent that we have to get past when it comes to supporting and getting past competition and getting past comparison. But I think we have reached a point where we have such a strong willingness to support one another. We have such a strong willingness to be a voice and advocate for one another and really point to each other's business goals and say, how can I help you get where you're trying to go in a way that hasn't always necessarily been the case? And so from my standpoint, when I think about the relationship of business owners, be it coaches, be it retailers, be it digital e-commerce sites, be it any other service provider. We are looking to see how we can support one another first in a way that uplifts our community. And I think that that's powerful.
I think that it is powerful. And I think to your point, just how you really illustrated like how relationships have been strengthened. And I love that you said it, because as I reflected, I'm like, she's right. Relationships have been strengthened, whether that's with the neighbor next door, because sometimes we had to, with COVID, right? You were checking on your neighbors, food was being delivered. And so I do believe you hit a nerve right there, because I was like, wow, have they? But you do realize that it has been strengthened. We are now becoming trusting of people better than we probably have been. And I just never thought of it. And when I sat here, I'm like, wow, I think Denise has a very solid perspective on that. I want to say, what in your mind, like what makes a relationship valued? And I'm asking that question because we say, we have several relationships in the corporate space as an agency owner, but what makes a relationship value? And I love for you to give, for me, Denise, you are a business leader, right? You are a Fortune 500 leader, but I also want to look at it as what makes that relationship value as a wife.
I think the thing that makes our relationship valued, and it's so interesting that you keyed in on as a wife, is really us being able to look at our personal value and get to the point where we really understand the word that rings through it, even in the name of your podcast, matters, right? We have been on a journey to understanding and accepting, and in some cases, having it finally acknowledged that we matter, right? And so I'll give you an example, because you said wife. A few years ago, in the fall of 2019, I was at home. I was on medical leave, and my husband and I were planning for our 25th wedding anniversary. And when we were planning for the anniversary, I was getting really excited. But as I was handing invitations out to my friends, they were saying to me, I'm happy for you, but I'm not sure we're going to make it. And in that moment, because it kept coming back so often from people, I began asking myself, how did we get here? It hadn't been a cakewalk. It hadn't been anything that I or he necessarily did. And we hadn't been precluded from any of life's experiences. But somehow we got to the point where we were on the cusp of celebrating 25 years. And as I did a reflection, there were a couple of themes that kind of kicked out for me. And I was moved at that time to start an organization, to start a group called the First Wives Club. Now, I will tell you, it didn't start off to be what it is now. It started off because I was like, I feel like I should do something. So I invited 8 women over to my house thinking, if I could just mentor them, if I could just pour into them and try to help, because that was one of the things that stuck out for me, is I had somebody come alongside and help another relationship, right? A mentoring relationship. Well, I created this little Facebook group with the 8 of us. And now 2 years later, there's over 1,300 women in the group across 25 plus countries across the world, where we're all in there with one common thing. We're trying to get this love thing right, right? We're in a relationship, and we have this role as wife, or this role as woman in his life when it comes to a committed relationship. So when you ask me about our value, one of the things that we began to understand very powerfully over the last couple of years with the experiences we had to face trying to love and support a Black man, is that we sat in a very powerful seat when it came to relationship. And so my whole thing was, if you can get the wife to stay, then you can save the family. You can save the marriage, because once she checks out, it's a wrap, right? Once the wife is kind of like, I'm done, it's over. And so I wanted to create a safe place where women could come and be encouraged in their love relationship. Healthy, non-toxic, non-abusive, because I'm not an advocate for that. But I wanted you to know that one, you were not alone. Two, that you could process through, but it was going to take some work. One of the things that I say over and over and over again in that community is that we have to be willing to grow personally in order to soar relationally. And this is getting back to where I started with the word mattered. Many of us have brought trauma from our past in relationships. And because we have brought the trauma into the relationship, we are not showing up authentically. And because we're not showing up authentically, we are not thriving in that love relationship. Over the last couple of years, we have had to rise up in ways and really have truth of whether or not we could be there for the many, many pressure packed situations that we had to face. I never in my entire life of being married to my husband for 25 years feared whether or not he would come home. Right. That was a different fear to me once I saw what tragedy George Floyd experienced. It created something in me that said I had to rise up and really mature to the point where I could thrive in my role. And so when you start talking about those type of pressures, you begin to understand more and more why the wife matters. And so it's in the First Wives Club where we just try to encourage the love relationship, and that's where my first book, I've done 2 books now, but my first book really was born out of being available to serve the wives in that community. The title of the book is I'm the Good Thing. And it's a 30-day journey that is relationship based, but not, because what I have found is you got to be willing to do that me work, that personal work, so that you can really understand your power and how to show up effectively in your relationship. And so the role of the wife is critical, especially when you're talking about the Black family structure.
First of all, thank you for being authentic. I feel like we have had some of the best guests who have been authentic, and that I appreciate it and I'm grateful for it. Do you find that as you think through that, once we are safe within ourselves and we're doing our personal work, do you believe that that helps in our professional lives? Because I remember, and this was several years ago, Denise, I spoke at the CEO conference, which was entrepreneurs something. It was, I can't remember the acronym. But anyway, I had gone to speak in my journey as an entrepreneur, CEO, and out of the blue, young white woman says to me, she says, why aren't you married? Mm-hmm. And it crushed me because apparently she didn't see my value as a CEO, as a single person. Mm-hmm. But as she crushed it, to me, I started to do the work, because in her own eyes, right, as a young white girl, for her, she saw how you thrive is with a partner. Mm-hmm. That's how she saw it. And when I started to look at it, they're able to get more, they can do more, they can have a stronger family. That doesn't mean that they don't have the traumas that they have too. Initially I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm not married. This is just crushing me. So then what's crazy is that it made me question my value, because I wasn't. And so I felt like I went through life like, oh, can I do this and not have it? And I love that you took a direction to really help those that are married, because I do believe that as single women figuring it out, I don't think that, and I'm saying this right now, Denise, I don't know that there's enough, I'm going to use the word enough, married people that have helped to allow for single women to see that you can have this amazing business with this amazing husband and have a thriving business or a thriving relationship. Mm-hmm. We've never seen that dynamic as Black people or as Black business owners. And when I start to study the businesses that thrive, Denise, the ones that really thrive, I'm talking about thrive, they have a partner. they're not doing this all alone. They have a partner, whether that partner, whatever that role, whether they're working in the business, in the house, they're doing something, and that helps them able to do that. So I asked the question, is that why when we see our relationships in business relationships, do you think that bleeds into our ability to thrive in our businesses or even in our roles as corporate leaders for those that are corporate leaders?
It's really interesting that you say that, because as my career was blossoming, if I could say that word, I noticed something when I turned the corner. I noticed when I turned the corner from being a manager to a director, when I started interacting with vice presidents and the people who were at the top of the corporate chain at different companies, I noticed that their husbands were stay-at-home dads pretty consistently, right? And so that kind of stuck out to me because there is a demand that comes from a highly aggressive, high achieving woman who has aspirations to get to those levels. And because there's such a demand on her, oftentimes if they cannot find a partner that is willing to be for them what they need, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second, be for them what they need, they find themselves alone. Now, here's what I mean, be for them for what they need. What a professional, high achieving woman who has hit the CEO rank and running an organization that is multifaceted needs is completely different than someone who is at more of an entry level and taking on demands of home. And it takes a different type of man to deal with the high-powered woman and realize that what she needs from him is not money. It's not prestige. It is not these great things that you think you can provide her, because in many cases she has those things. What she needs from you is likely your loyalty, your attention. She probably is most intrigued because you make her laugh. She probably is most intrigued because when she's with you, you give her your undivided attention and you care for her in a way that makes her feel like she is the only one in the room. Now, there's a lot of men who won't sign up for that, right? Because ego will keep them to the side because they just really realize that they will have to question whether or not they are willing to give up their man card to be for her what she needs. But I consistently saw, especially with a lot of white women and even Latino women, that their husbands had deliberately made a choice to stay at home and not pursue an aggressive career, which meant he had to be willing to make a sacrifice in that way. I think one of the unfortunate things that happened in the scenario that you faced with the young lady saying what she did, she was sharing with you her experience and what she knew, the dynamic that she knew, and how she defined success. So one of the things that I am an advocate for is I believe that we can be, do, have, and achieve anything that we want. We get to define what that success looks like. And when we unfortunately have situations where there is projecting that occurs, right, from people in their experiences, it kind of challenges what we may believe. But the bottom line is you have carved out for yourself what is important to you. I also believe that God can bring along somebody who fits perfectly in that puzzle and is willing to make the personal, sometimes career, sometimes family adjustments that are necessary to accommodate being in love with you. But I don't believe that we should have to sacrifice that opportunity for ourselves for the sake of love. And that's just me. Now, you're talking to somebody who's been married 27 years now, right? And when I say that, I've been with my husband since I was 18, and I'm grateful because 18-year-old Denise was different than 28-year-old Denise, was different than 38, was different than 48-year-old Denise. And fortunate for me, he has been able to go through those differences in my life as I have evolved. Men, if they are ego based, and most men are, and I hate to be stereotypical that way, but most men are, will struggle with a woman who is running it because that's kind of the seat they want to fill. And so it's going to take a unique person that God has specifically ordained for your life to come in and give you what you desire and what you want.
Thank you for just walking us through that. Because I think as women and high performing women, no Black woman has illustrated that so eloquently. You're absolutely right. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, where was this? What I do want to ask you is that, do you believe that women are given permission to do that while in that business environment? I feel like when we think about the others, right, whether it's white women or European women, whatever, they are comfortable with saying, oh, my husband's a stay-at-home dad, right? Why does it feel so bad, if you will, that when that woman is empowered to be the CEO or vice president, why is it deemed negative to communities?
Because it's just not the norm, especially for our culture. It's becoming the norm. We are emerging into a space where all this Black girl magic is showing up, and we are unashamed about it. We are unapologetic about it, and we are not shrinking and settling and discounting ourselves anymore. And it's beautiful, but it's new. The people who pioneered, I mean, think about it. When you think about a Shirley Chisholm and you think about people who pioneered in their time, they were not the norm at all. And they made choices to sacrifice that was against the grain of everybody around them. So one of the things is that it's new. I think I hate to call it white, but I think the Caucasian women began to see themselves excelling to different heights and made the shifts that were necessary for their family dynamic. And that's happening more so for us now as we excel and accelerate to higher levels, whether it's within an organization or ones we're building on our own. But I think it was less accepted because it was new. It was different. It went against the norm of what we thought, one, was achievable for us, and two, it's very likely that you are the first doing what you're doing out of your family unit. You are the first doing what you're doing out of your peer set of cousins even, right? And because you are kind of shifting the mode and changing the game, it feels and looks foreign to them. And that's when you get you think you so good, you get some of those kind of contexts is because it's new and different. But I think when we fast forward to 20 years from now, and you look at the generation that's coming up and where they're going to be in the mindset that they have, it won't be as new, if you will, as it feels for the groundbreaking and the trailblazing that's happening now. Just really take yourself back. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the mainstream conversation was whether or not women preachers could be. I mean, that was a mainstream conversation in the Black church, whether or not we were going to allow women preachers. That conversation, while it still may be in pockets of churches, I feel like we have gotten way past that now, right?
I agree, Denise. We have definitely gotten past that. I totally agree.
Yeah. And so I just feel like when something is new and it's emerging, we gawk at it and we think that it's strange. And think about the mobile phones when they first came out. We thought it was strange, right? That somebody was walking around, and now we can't go nowhere without it. We'd be halfway to where we go and realize we forgot our phone and come all the way back home to get it. And so we thought it was strange. And so as things emerged, I remember first hearing about the electric car and I thought it was strange, right? Within the next 5 or 10 years, I guarantee you, me and you gonna have one, right? If you don't have one already. And so the new things emerging, including ourselves, including our experiences, they feel uncommon. They feel unique. I had a post the other day that talked about what looks strange to us now because it's innovation, right? It talked about how, think about this, banks don't like Bitcoin, taxis don't like Uber, hotels don't like Airbnb, stores don't like Amazon, theaters don't like Netflix. Innovation is always unliked when it first happens, but then it becomes our norm. And so I think the same is true in our experience, especially as we're merging. But we are blossoming at such a high rate now. I mean, like people are showing up and taking the blinders off of themselves, taking the lid off of their gift. They're emerging with small businesses that are making the difference at the heart of our communities. We have really shown up in big numbers to address more than just the chicken store, the fried chicken place. We are addressing heart issues. We are addressing trauma. We are addressing life coaching and these things that are going to make a significant difference in how we move forward as a community, that when you look ahead, it's just going to be amazing.
I do want to ask this question because I do wonder, when you think about global, and I love when you said strange, because I do think that is what it is. It's just like, oh, you're going to do this? Like, I just recall that. And so now to your point, like my new motto is doing different. Like I want to do all things new. Like I don't want to keep doing the same stuff. Like give me something different. So I do want to say, do you believe that Black relationships are valued? And you mentioned strengthen, but as a whole, do you believe that Black relationships are valued through the lens of mass America?
So I think relationships take on different forms. And so I believe that they are valued. I don't know that they are prioritized. And to me, that is two different things. When you start talking about the relationship of the family unit, I believe it's valued. I don't know that it's prioritized within the masses for the Black culture alone. But I do think the value unit for the Black culture has elevated in a way that we are understanding the necessity for it more and really showing up to be more loyal and committed to relationships because of what needs to come from them. I think we're seeing that tide shift. I don't know that we're seeing marriage increase, but I do think we're seeing loyalty increase, and that you're seeing the definition of family be refactored in a way that it takes on new hues. It's not about how long you necessarily been married, but are you committed to going the distance together? And I think you're going to see that continue to evolve, especially in the newer generations. When you start talking about the value of Blacks in the workplace, I'm torn. In some cases, it feels like rhetoric because there's a little bit of an expectation that they're supposed to value it in light of all of the societal things that have come up. But I have found pockets of people being really authentic and understanding the importance of it. And I believe good is going to outweigh bad. I believe some motives can be challenged. And I think it's being prioritized more. I have felt it be prioritized more in my own experience. And so I believe it's valued. I think it needs to be grown in terms of prioritization. When you look at love relationships, man with woman, I think that the pandemic put a lot of pressure on people, put a lot of pressure on relationships. It changed the game completely in how we had to show up and be available. And anytime you put pressure on the thing, whatever is in that thing is what's going to come out. You put pressure on an orange, you're going to get orange juice. You put pressure on an olive, you're going to get olive oil. You put pressure on people and on relationships, what's in it is what's going to come out. I think that one of the things that was a byproduct of the pandemic is a quest for authenticity. And as a result of that quest for authenticity and that assessment of what's really important to me and really valuable to me, some people did make a decision that they weren't as committed in the relationship. But I do think that all of that is value. The question to me is, does the masses prioritize it in to a degree that they should in order for it to get the respect or garner the attention that it needs to? And that's to me where the answered question lies.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I do think that there is and I say value because for us as a culturally sensitive marketing firm, we are helping brands to identify micro and nano influencers and identifying the authentic relationships. And so while we're in this role of advocating to showcase how micro, nano, which is a small number of followers, are just as important as someone who has 1 million followers, right? That it is valued. The reason why I brought that up is because those micro and nano influencers in that space of marketing influencers, they still have value even though their numbers are lower, right? So a person still has value even though they're not a homeowner. People have value even though they don't have a business, right? And so recognizing that we have looked at numbers as the leading point, whether that's how many years you've worked in a job, how much money did you save a company, how much money did you make for the company? And so we've used that value in the sense of how do I benefit, right? Mm-hmm. And not in a space of this relationship with Denise, this one-on-one is such a valuable relationship because I thank her for her time to be here as a guest. How can we see that as value and not looking at, well, how many books did she sell? What, and I say that because in this business, that's the stories we think about. And so I'm going to ask that question because why we built this is understanding why do Black businesses matter? Mm-hmm. And so recognizing that every business matters. I've heard people say that, right? But why specifically do Black businesses matter? And I'm curious to hear what you say as it relates to relationships and why they matter.
I believe they more than matter. Black business is necessary. There's so much ingenuity that comes out of our culture in so many different ways. When you look back over just sheer invention and you look back over what we have been able to contribute to the marketplace in general, I would say it's a necessity. So I think it goes deeper than just mattering. I think forging relationship is going to require us to recognize the necessity to go global and really forge outside the bounds of just this country alone when we think about relationship. I think that there's going to continue to be a shift at the higher levels of the country because of sheer census numbers. And you look at the turnover of what populations are growing at a faster rate than others. And that's just going to mean that the landscape is going to start to look different. And I think the dollar we control and the dollar that we bring to the marketplace is also an indication of the value of maintaining the relationship. Here's what I believe is going to have to change is we're going to have to educate ourselves. We're going to have to be willing to partner outside of the country lines, which means that we may have to learn languages that we don't know. We may have to be willing to travel and go to places that we haven't been. We may have to trust somebody other than Bob, who I've known since elementary school. We may have to really extend ourselves in ways that is going to force us to become more business savvy, more intelligent in our business acumen, and more available for prosperity. And so the relationship and the scope of relationships is going to have to expand if we want to truly rise to the ranks of mattering to the fabric of this country, because we, in some cases, are still very isolated. We are working well with one another, but the true power means that we've got to jump in some driver's seats on a different stage, right? And begin to have impact at a different level. And so the context of relationships, we've talked about a number of different relationships, but I believe that when it comes to business, you're going to have to really think outside of the box so that your business can begin to tap into communities beyond the one you live in, neighborhoods beyond the one you live in, cities beyond the one you live in, states. Like, you're going to have to be willing to stretch yourself, and that gets uncomfortable at times. So depending on where you are with taking on that stretch, I believe will make a difference in how you will matter in terms of the grand scheme of what's available to you.
Wow, Denise, that's powerful. One of our earlier guests talked about going global, and I have to admit to you that going, this idea of being uncomfortable, I love that. I do want to take this moment to reintroduce, because if you are joining a podcast and you're just loving this amazing interview with Denise Taylor, I want to make sure that you know how to connect with her. So Denise, can you share your handles where people can connect with you? And then we'll talk about your books next, but I want to make sure that people can connect to you socially.
Yep. So you can connect with me online at www.denisetaylor.live, Live. And my social handles follows that same vein. So denisetaylor.live on Facebook, Denise Taylor Live on Instagram. I will tell you, Facebook is probably more of my playground than Instagram, and LinkedIn is where I'm starting to blossom more. And so those are the mainstream social platforms that I'm on, but the website is a direct link to me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that I really try to encourage people as much as possible to really have a web presence. And, because while we connect and use social media connect, you are giving your content away through social platforms. And so, I know as a person that's a marketer, how can I say that? But I say you should have, we say, an omni approach to how you want to connect. So you get to connect to me socially here, but I feel like your website is where I say is the kitchen, right? This is where the real relationships are being built.
Right.
And outside of the kitchen, you got the living room, you got this, but that's just another room that you get to meet and connect with others. And so understanding how those different platforms are valued, because as you know, or you don't remember Instagram shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people were unable to connect because they didn't have that online presence and they rely on this one machine. But just as you just mentioned about relationships, right? You got to go global. So, and so being online is one way to go global. So when you said that, I appreciate that. So Denise, your books, tell people, how can people get this book? I know you've got several books. You've mentioned one, but then there's one, your latest, which is Embrace Your Power and Go. Now that one just resonates because I'm just such a go girl. So I was like, embrace your power and go. So I fell in love, but I know you've got other books, but please tell us.
Yeah, I've got the two. Both of them are available on Amazon. So again, the first one is I'm the Good Thing. It's a 30-day journal for growth and fulfillment. And while it's targeted for people in relationships, this is going to help you do the me work. And I will say this because I spoke to it earlier. When I talk about growing personally being a prerequisite for flourishing in your relationships, I mean all relationships, because it helps you to show up more effectively across the board, which is why it inspires more fulfillment and growth. Embrace Your Power and Go is my latest book. Very excited about it. It's a phrase that I say all the time on my podcast, which is life, love, and the pursuit of happiness. I always say, embrace your power and go. And so I wanted to write a book because what I find is a lot of people are stuck in the starting blocks, right? They know they've been called to do something. They know Like they sit and you meet them at Sunday dinner, right? Where they got the big idea, they spell it all out, and then they never execute. They never get out of the starting blocks. Embrace Your Power and Go is the help to get you out of the starting blocks and to get you really walking in that what you want to be, do, have, or achieve. And so I'm really excited about that too. It's another 30-day journal. Both of them have the aspects of being tools to help you work it out. I was very intentional in trying to make sure it wasn't a literary work where you just sat and read, but you created some goals. You said some affirmations. You really tried to personalize the journey so that you could get out of the starting block or you could get the fulfillment. So I'm excited about both of the books.
And I'm excited for those to know more about you and to get your book. I want to ask you this. Do you believe that the absence of personal work is the reason why that business isn't thriving? Do you think that there's a connection to that in how you show up in your business?
Yeah. And here's why I say that. I believe in the concept of being a lifelong learner. And when you are a lifelong learner means that there is something I've been exposed to that has had an impact or influence on me that has caused me to shift or transition in response to what I have learned. If you are not a lifelong learner, ready to respond, ready to shift, ready to transition, then you become stagnant. You aren't manifesting the growth. And so I believe it's impactful to that because you cannot experience a journey without having it impact you. Otherwise, it's almost as if you go into the pool and you're not really getting in, right? So did you really go swimming when you went to the pool? And so in order to have your business grow, you have to be willing to be a learner, which means you got to take it in, you got to apply it so that it can make a difference. And so, yeah, I do agree with that.
I'm so glad you said that, Denise, as someone, who speaks to this, because I find that as business grows, there's something inside of you that you're not working through. And I'll even, share that with me. When I started to lean into Larvetta and who is Larvetta outside of being a business owner, I had to rediscover myself, right? I show up, I'm doing business, but what I had figured out was that I had been overly consumed in the business that I didn't have an identity outside of it. I didn't know, who I was as it relates to this idea of everything was related to the business. And granted, I love what I do, right? So it's not anything, but everything I do is not to generate money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I just had a conversation with someone and the challenge was to describe yourself without talking about what you do or what role or title you have. And a lot of us struggle, but it's that me work that helps you understand that the best. And usually the me work is going to make you reckon with some of the things that you just been doing for reasons that are not authentic to who you are.
Yeah.
And that's when you start seeing people quit the job, sell the house. You start seeing them do things that seems a bit unorthodox is because they find they're not in congruence with who they have discovered they are. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you're spot on with that.
And I think, Denise, it's crazy because when I'm young, I love networking. And so my networking style is I never come in a room to say what I do. I come in a room, what I do for Lens, I come in the room of who I am. Mm-hmm. And I've done that all my life. Like, be like, I don't even know, what did she do? She talked about this. And so to me, it was to get you curious and fascinated by me, right? Mm-hmm. And me be curious and fascinated by you, that I forgot to mention, or later we discover, and this is what I say about relationships, we later discover I'm in the market for a home. Oh, actually, I'm a realtor. But we didn't come in the door like, hi, I'm such and such. And so it was very authentic where I would have shown up, Denise saying what I do for a living, right? They would have shown a realtor and I'd be like, and then And then at that moment, I would feel like I have to connect with you because I'm looking for a home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it's very natural and organic and authentic from that standpoint. So I think that that's something we can do with people that are not, whether that's a woman, that's a white woman, as my wife, we can talk about, girl, I love wine. I love,
Mm-hmm.
and connect in that way without being able to lead with that. And so I do want to ask you this. I ask every guest, and I get some of the most fascinating responses. And I just had one, and I just love that they were so present with it. And that question is, what brings you joy?
It's interesting because the thing that brings me joy now has changed as a result of me doing the work, right? The thing that brings me joy now is being able to soak in moments, being present for moments. I spent so much of my life hustling behind, going after, moving real fast, chasing the next thing, not necessarily material things, but just completely in overdrive mode. And being able to slow down and actually take in the moment and enjoy the moment with my family, or enjoy the moment experiencing something beautiful, whether it's sitting at a rooftop pool and just looking out, that brings me joy, is just having the wherewithal to slow down and take in the moment.
Denise, I'm telling you, I'm loving that question, and I get so many different responses, and knowing that what you're saying is, for now, joy changed for me. And I think it's okay that it changes, and being okay with the pivot in our lives, and understanding like it was the joy of, I've heard people say the joy of my kids, graduating from college and leaving my house. Believe it or not, it was a joy. Now the joy is we're doing my house, right? So everybody has it. And I do believe if we lead with joy, I think that it yields far better returns than we could ever imagine.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you.
What do you say are 3 tips that you believe as someone who has been a Fortune 500 leader that they need to look at today?
So here's what I would say. The first one is you have to see yourself successful. I don't care where you are, what point you're facing, you have to see yourself successful. That means you've got to visit your future on the canvas of your imagination and allow yourself to dream. The biggest mistake we make is we begin to apply realism to it and shrink it down. But when you see yourself successful, I want you to leave that big. Number 2, I call these the success power, superpower. So number 2 is you have to shake off fear. You have to figure out a regimen to allow yourself to shake off fear, which is nothing more than false evidence appearing real. Shake it off. Fear is the thing that forces us to try to shrink the vision, but God can't get in there and help make the vision come to pass if you don't leave room for him. So you got to leave it big. Number 3 is we got to do the work. Sometimes we think we can just shortcut, sidestep, work around, but you have to do the work. The work is where you're going to learn the things that you need to know to get to that next level, that next experience. And so don't try to get out of doing the work. Just roll up your sleeves and do it. It comes with the promise, though. God said he'll bless the work of our hands. Number 4 is that you have to take care of you. The mantle of greatness is heavy. It is very heavy, which means that you need to be fit for the journey. And when I talk about taking care of you, I'm not just talking about manicures and pedicures, and I am a manicure girl. So I'm talking about every aspect of who you are, your mind, your body, your soul. You need to have somebody you're talking to that's helping you process and get the things out and understand how to effectively clear your head so that you can pursue what it is you're trying to do. You've got to have a financial plan. You need somebody who is coaching you from a professional standpoint. And all of those aspects are worth the investment because it's greatness that we're after in the vision. And then finally, you got to hold fast to your faith. Now, I believe in God, and I know there's a whole lot of other things out there that people believe in. I'm just going to say this. Make sure that whatever you believe in, you can lean on it, get stability from it, hope from it, trust in it, be guided by it, and rely on it. And for me, that is God. There will be days of contradiction when you're looking at a situation or a circumstance and you know what you're believing for and they don't look the same. And it's in those days that you need to hold fast to your faith. And so those are the 5 nuggets that I would give. And it doesn't matter what you're trying to achieve. You should see yourself successful, shake off fear, do the work, take care of you, and hold fast to your faith.
Like all that right there, I was like, drop the mic. Seriously, like drop the mic. I do think that those 5 tips are so, because that fear thing will just keep you paralyzed and stuck. And we're not able to do this. And so, Denise, this has truly been a joy and a pleasure to have you. I want to take this opportunity as we close to remind our listeners of how they can connect with you again. So if you could share that one more time.
Absolutely. Everything is available right on my website, which is www.DeniseTaylor. No funky spelling, just plain old DeniseTaylor.live.
I love it. And Denise is on LinkedIn the same way, Instagram, Facebook. She said Facebook is her space. This is where that's her kitchen. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever her kitchen, but that is Denise's kitchen. So don't get mad at her if you're reaching out to her on Instagram and she hasn't responded. She hasn't made it to the living room yet.
I love that. This has been amazing. I have enjoyed you immensely. I appreciate you. Please keep doing what you're doing. It is necessary work. It is making a difference in people's lives. And that is the key thing that matters.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Denise. I appreciate that. Thank you, listeners, for another episode of Black Businesses Matter. I want to say this. If you really love this episode, leave us a comment. Tell us how much you appreciate this episode and you want to see more of this. We are being very intentional with listening to our listeners and bringing you topics that you want to hear more of so that we can continue to introduce you to new businesses, introduce you to new thought leaders that people you may not have heard of. And I say there's so many unicorns in the world. And so if we can get closer to those that are doing amazing work, I do believe that they are able to produce more unicorns. So even if you have a story, please email us and reach out to us. Again, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Black Businesses Matter.
Thank you for joining us this week on Black Businesses Matter podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen so you will never miss a show. You can also follow us on social media at the L3 Agency and at Larvetta Speaks. If you love the show, leave a rating so that we can continue to bring you impactful episodes. You can also take the pledge and order our merch at our website at thell3agency.com. THEL3agency.com. Thanks for listening and see you next week.